Last year, we already published an episode to celebrate International Men's Day, to shed some light on the struggles they are facing and what they can do to actively contribute to the cause of equality. We had the pleasure of talking with François Génaud and Franck Poncerat. We discussed gender equality at PwC, how they promote it in their daily life, and how they felt working under women. Today, we are going to continue this discussion with Philipp Grother, who is an executive coach and founder of Stepping Stone, and Yoliana, who is a director in our technology advisory department. And for the very last question, we will meet again Marc, our DEI leader at PwC, who we already met for our last episode. Hello everyone, how are you doing today?
Excellent.
Absolutely fantastic, thank you.
Even if the weather is not that great today, but at least it's not raining. We'll take it, right?
That's always a plus in Luxembourg.
Okay, so right off the bat, why is it so important that we celebrate International Men's Day?
Well, because as we celebrate the Women's Day, we should also celebrate Men's Day. We are both important, and it's a very good opportunity to look or to focus on the impact that men have in our lives, in their families, the positive impact also in the communities, and in this case at PwC, of course. We also want to highlight and to make sure that every man feels this is their day.
I think that it's important to celebrate at least a day of awareness, because there are so many conversations that we don't necessarily have. We take the place of man and woman for granted. And I think that today is simply the opportunity to highlight some of the challenges that men might actually face that nobody talks about, really. And we're going to come back to that a bit later on in the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is true that we need to understand both sides, men and women, because we are two sides of the same coin. So if we want to truly achieve an equal world, we need to understand the struggles everyone is facing. Which brings me to my next question. What are the most important challenges men are facing that may go unnoticed?
I think that when we consider the role of man, historically, there's been a lot of unseen pressure that goes into being a man in general, right? And because that has been taken for granted for century, if not millennia, because the role of man and woman is changing nowadays, I think that women need to become conscious of, if we are going to achieve equality, it's not just a question of women being able to play a more active role. It's also women recognizing how much pressure men are under. And when we're actually looking to find solutions, men need to feel like they can speak up, because the emotional challenges that we can face, we are simply not trained from a very young age to express our emotions. And so opening up that safe space in which to talk is going to be only one of the things that we can talk about in depth today.
Maybe, Yoliana, from your point of view, from a woman, what do you think may be the biggest challenges for men nowadays?
That's an interesting question, and Catherine, because at PwC, and I am new into the diversity and inclusion office, and I'm very happy to start looking at also this men's dimension. I think we have an opportunity to understand further what are the challenges, as Philippe just explained. I am not really fully aware that we are facing those issues, but it's true that there are things happening outside. I think the suicide rate of men increased, and this brought the attention since last year of what is happening with the mental health of men. Are we paying attention to that? And why not here at PwC to start bringing this opportunity to improve, if any person from our colleagues needs to have a space to feel better. So again, I think this is all about women and men, not only gender balance relates to women, and not only our intention to provide diversity and inclusion should look at women topics, but we will focus this year a bit of more attention to see how we can help also men.
I think it's important to understand that not only the role of a woman is evolving, but also the one of a man. And in general, we need to create the safe space where each and every one has the chance to express themselves freely, and that without getting judged from the other party for what they're saying. Because as you said earlier, men are supposed to be the strong ones, the confident ones. They don't show any emotions. Meanwhile, women who usually show emotions are like, oh, they're weak, we need to protect them. And creating that safe space where everyone is open to say and to feel and to express themselves should be the first step.
And paradoxically, it's not actually man versus woman, woman versus man. It's also man with man and man with women with women as well. You mentioned the word judgment, and that I think is absolutely fundamental on both sides of the same coin, as to use your analogy. Essentially, if we can help people have much healthier conversations around what it's like to be, and let's take PwC as an example, right? Whether you're a junior, an entry level, all the way through to partner level, believe it or not, and this is something that is probably going to resonate for quite a few people, the higher up in the hierarchy you go, the less voice you probably have, which is a paradox, right? You're one of the most powerful people in the company, and yet you probably feel the most isolated. And so maybe today, in celebrating quote unquote Man's Day, it's the opportunity for us all to say, no matter who you are, from junior all the way through to partner and above, you can rely on your fellow colleagues, men and women, to be able to express yourself. But that's also very much in culture, right? Everybody throughout the organization needs to live that culture. And if you, as PwC, and I say this as an external individual, if you want to achieve that, it all starts here, but then everybody needs to start living it personally, right? And this is something that we all need to get used to, and being open to having those conversations. Because if you're not open to having a conversation about emotions, even between two guys, how do you expect everybody else to feel comfortable expressing themselves around you? You need to be the first to say, you can come and talk about your emotions with me. Right? And it all starts with ourselves.
And it also shows a lot of courage to do so.
Absolutely.
I'm a psychologist by training, and I know how much courage it takes to open up, even if it's just like a therapist who is supposed to not judge. But still, we are afraid to say really what we feel and what we think, because society tells us there are things that are wrong that we're not supposed to think or to feel. So opening up to a colleague is even harder. So start by small steps. Be like, oh, today I'm completely stressed out. Don't put on the facade of being like, oh, I'm fine. It's okay. I'm totally under the water, but I'm going to be fine. Maybe you're not. And tell your colleagues, let them know. Maybe they want to jump in. Maybe they have some tips or pieces of advice to share.
Maybe this is something that we need to unlearn. And now I'm talking as a guy, right? Now, this is something that women need to understand, right? And I'm absolutely not wanting to sound condescending, but we as men are programmed from a societal point of view. When somebody comes to us with a problem, we think we need to solve it, right? From a woman's perspective, and please correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes all you need is for somebody to listen to you, right? And so here we can illustrate a simple societal conditioning that illustrates perfectly the difference between man and woman. It's not a bad thing, right? But when women express themselves, sometimes all they need is to be heard. And when guys hear about a problem, what we think is, I see problem, I must solve it. Because me, caveman, I am going to go out and, kill the mammoth, right? Because that's my job. Exactly. But you see, what we're doing here is, and obviously, for the listeners, you can't see the smile on everybody's face, but there's a smile of understanding of, hang on a minute, maybe it is as simple as explaining what it's like to be a guy, what it's like to be a woman from an emotional point of view, and just understanding that it's okay for us to be different. Yeah. And it's okay for guys when somebody comes along and says, you know what, actually, I'm really feeling X. down or overwhelmed or overloaded. It's okay for me as a guy not to think I need to go and help that person solve that problem. And you see how simple that example is. And yet it's one of the building blocks of creating understanding between men and women. Maybe that's where we need to start.
And I think it starts with a very simple question of asking, what do you need from me? I started doing that with my friends when I see they're upset. I'm a problem solver. I'm not really good at giving support. So I'm asked, what do you need from me? Do you need me to listen? Do you need me to distract you? Do you need a solution? What do you need? And then I know what they want, what they need. And it opens up the conversation around, okay, maybe this is not my first instinct, but I'm here for you and give you what you need as my friend or as my colleague.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Now, how we put that in place at PwC, right?
That's a very broad question.
No, it's really, I see the benefit of having this space to communicate and to express, to speak out about the needs that men have. And definitely we should find a way to open or to give the possibility to our teams to get to communicate with someone. The good point is we have also HR here.
Yeah, so, luckily. But I think whenever you see someone struggling or you feel like, oh, something is off, because sometimes just a gut feeling like maybe they're not feeling super well, you're like, hey, how are you feeling? What do you need from me? And sometimes it's maybe just a distraction of grabbing a coffee and just stepping away from the desk for 5 minutes and just talk about something not related to work. It doesn't need to be the most deepest conversation around emotions, but it's just like a first step to build also this safe space of like, I allow you to take some space to express yourself and to share something with me, and that I will take away. Maybe I learn something from the conversation and you go out of there feeling a little bit more relieved. And that's just the baseline that we can easily start with and that everyone can do in their daily life. And you don't need to have a specific training or be a psychologist to do it.
You're right. It's awareness, then being aware and start putting that in practice, because we are all able or entitled to talk about what we feel and entitled to decide whether we are responsible or not for the things that are happening, to other people.
And maybe because we also briefly touched on the subject of gender equality, from your point of view, Philip, being a man, how do you see the role of a man in contributing to a path towards gender equality?
That's an excellent question, because I come back to this analogy of two sides of the same coin, right? I think that more and more guys are realizing that the more we raise equity and equality, because they're not quite the same thing. And I think that for our audience, it might be a good idea for us to and for you to briefly tell us as a psychologist what the difference is between equality and equity, if you want, afterwards. I think that once most guys, if not all guys, realize that raising everyone, so men, women, and everything in between, we need to realize that everybody stands to benefit and everybody stands to gain as a whole, right? Because this whole idea, and this I observe because I'm incredibly lucky to be with an empowered woman. And when I observe how powerful she feels, all I'm doing is supporting her, right? And as a man, I feel that my role is to not just support the woman that I am with, but to support all women around me, because I see the benefit of elevating absolutely everybody to the best of my ability, right? And so I see my role as a man to elevate everyone around me. Of course, when it's women, it's women. When it's men, it's men. But as long as I'm playing my role of elevating and trying to add value to everybody else, I benefit massively. And if everybody could realize that elevating everyone around us benefits everyone as a whole, whether we're talking about the organization, whether we're talking about ourselves personally, everybody stands to gain.
I fully agree. And to equality, equity, maybe for the listeners out there, one is giving the same to everyone. And the other one means taking a closer look at what they actually need to go to the same point. Imagine like someone a little bit smaller and someone taller. They try to look over a wall well, one might need a box a little bit higher up than the other, so they have the same point of view in the end. And that's basically the principle of equity between equality.
Absolutely. I think that that's something that we need to come back to, an understanding that it's okay for different people to need different things.
And to want different things as well.
Absolutely.
So, Yoliana, as you're here today to represent the diversity and inclusion team of PwC, why do you think it is so important for us as a company to celebrate International Men's Day and also to raise awareness around the topics related to it?
We promote equality, and we, both men and women at PwC, should have all the opportunity and the well-being and the mind state that we want for our employees to succeed together with our objectives. So what we want, or what we see specifically on men, is two dimensions that are relevant from diversity perspective. One is men as supporters, ambassadors of gender inclusion, and here we have some work to be done, and we expect more men to come to work with us, to join the programs and to become these ambassadors across all the PwC organization. And the second dimension that you have been discussing about, which is very important and probably more a new topic we need to start working on, is how also to focus on specific men's needs and how to help to get this healthy mind state also for our men colleagues. So that's what is going to be part of our program. As you know, Marc Schernberg is now leading the new DEI. So we have changed the name. It's Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. And very soon we will be releasing the full plan for fiscal year 2024, which will include also launching a men's diversity club that's planned next quarter. So by March, we should have a specific program that is looking to develop or to work together with the men that wants to join these programs and help to increase our diversity awareness and, of course, to make our working environment better.
Okay, I'm very excited to see what you have planned for us for the remaining fiscal year.
And wait for it.
And speaking of which, Marc just joined us for the last and maybe the most important question of this episode. I would love to know from each and every one of you what piece of advice or key message you would like to share with our listeners.
Oh, well, so hi everybody, because I just joined by chance this little group and this podcast, and I think it's very interesting that we're working on that, because I think that, yes, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we think about a lot of things, and we mainly think about the gender equality around this. But as part of this gender equality, well, currently our gender, even though it goes beyond the men and women, today, I mean, gender is men also. So I think that it's important that, yes, we are aware that this International Men's Day really exists. But I think that it's also the right time for men also to reflect on their own being part of this diversity as such. For me, I mean, men are part of this diversity because, in fact, diversity does not only cover gender as such, but a lot of other aspects. So there's anyway a kind of intersection where men are also concerned. But fundamentally, and this is the history over the past maybe 10,000 years, I mean, there's always been a kind of, well, men have always had this power. And I think that, or being leading everywhere, in every direction, whether political or in families or in politics or whatever. So I think that over those years, men have received a kind of privilege. And I would like really that men also start to realize that they have, first of all, this privilege, but also that they can use this privilege to ensure that other elements of this diversity also get part of privilege or can be also helped to get to become privileged as such, and potentially reflect also on the fact that potentially they could give away part of this privilege, meaning that sharing is also the fact that maybe they are less always at the front, etc. And I think that this International Men's Day would be, for me, a key moment also for men to reflect on themselves and to reflect also how they can indeed influence, participate, engage on lots of other elements of diversity. And if everybody would understand that when you have a privilege, you are aware of it, and how can you use it to have an impact, that would be fantastic. So this is for me what this International Men's Day should be about.
Well, thank you, Marc. Yoliana?
Wow. Yes. So we are bringing all men of PwC on board on this diversity objective. And I think it's really a great opportunity. Again, you have the floor to bring the impact, a positive impact to all our community, despite of the gender. So let's just think about us, what is the best way to work together to do our PwC world better. And we are here for that, to support, to help, to make sure that we all can achieve our objectives, go as far as we want in this company with well-being, with harmony, and of course, with a smile when coming to work. That's very important.
Yes, indeed.
I think, and you raise a topic that's actually a never-ending story. And maybe this is the opportunity for this to be the start of a much wider conversation. You mention privilege. That's one thing. You mention, obviously, inclusion and everybody playing their role. That's another. I think that individually, we need to, before we can help anybody else, we need to help ourselves first. So we need to come inside ourselves and look inside ourselves so that we can start being in touch with our emotions, what it is like to be a man today. And that starts from the younger stage. So for those of you who are parents, reflect on what you're feeling from an emotional point of view today is something that we learn as children. So we shouldn't wait until we come into the corporate environment to start learning about, okay, what does it mean to be a man? This is something that we need to start teaching at a younger age so that we can bring the newer generations to not make the same mistakes that we're still making tens of thousands of years later, right? They will do better than us. And hopefully if we learn today, we can teach that to the younger generation, male and female, right? And everything in between, because that's another Pandora's box that we're not going to open today, right? But I think the fundamental message is it's all right to have emotions, and I'd like to thank you for obviously creating this space in which we can talk. You touched upon a subject of judgment, the subject of judgment earlier on. I think that the sooner we realize that we need to create a safe space in which there is no judgment and that people can explore their emotions, because learning about your emotions is also about exploring them. And sometimes you just need an ear to listen. And if that ear is not judging, we can learn better. So education and no judgment.
Well, thank you all so much that you had this much needed discussion with me today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much.
That's it for today's episode. And if you don't want to miss out on our upcoming stories, hit subscribe and feel free to share. Let us know what you think. Thank you for listening, and see you for the next episode of Casual Side.